"We don't serve your kind here," the barber said, looking down at 82-year-old Frank's worn clothes and shaking hands. The Saturday morning crowd in Tony's barbershop fell silent as Frank stood frozen in the doorway, his weathered fingers instinctively touching the faded eagle tattoo on his forearm that told a story none of them could imagine. What happens next will leave you speechless. If stories like this remind you why we should never judge a book by its cover, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments about a time someone surprised you with their hidden story. Frank Dalton had walked into Tony's barbershop that morning just wanting a simple haircut. His daughter Sarah was getting married next weekend, and he wanted to look his best. At 82, his silver hair had grown a bit too long, and his hands shook too much now to trim it himself. The shop was packed with the usual Saturday crowd. Young fathers with their sons, teenagers getting fresh cuts, and a few older men reading newspapers while they waited. Frank had been coming to this neighborhood for 3 months now, ever since he moved in with his nephew after his wife passed. But he had never been inside this particular shop. Tony Marcelli, the shop owner, looked up from his current customer, and his face immediately hardened. He saw Frank's faded jeans with patches, his old sneakers with worn soles, and his slightly trembling hands. The old man looked homeless to him. "We don't serve your kind here," Tony said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "This is a respectable establishment." Frank blinked in confusion. "I just need a haircut, sir. My daughter is getting married next week." "Look at you," Tony continued, his voice getting louder. "You probably can't even pay. This isn't some charity case barbershop. Go find somewhere else." The entire shop went quiet. Customers stopped their conversations. Kids stopped playing with their phones. Everyone was staring at the old man standing in the doorway, looking smaller and more fragile by the second. Frank's face turned red with embarrassment. "I have money," he said quietly, reaching for his wallet with shaking hands. "Sure you do," Tony laughed, and a few customers chuckled along. "Let me guess, you've got $1 million in there, right?" Frank opened his worn leather wallet and pulled out $40 in crumpled bills. "See, I can pay." Tony walked over and looked at the money, then back at Frank. "That wallet looks like it's been through a war," he said mockingly. "Just like you, old man. You probably picked it up from some trash can." The crowd was getting uncomfortable now. Tony turned on her. "Mind your own business, Linda. I run this shop how I want. I don't need some old bum making my other customers uncomfortable." Frank's hands were shaking harder now. He touched the small eagle tattoo on his forearm, a nervous habit he had developed over the years. "Please, sir. I just want to look nice for my daughter's wedding." "Your daughter?" Tony laughed even louder now. "What daughter would claim you as a father looking like that? You probably don't even have a family." That hit Frank like a punch to the stomach. His wife of 58 years had died 6 months ago. His daughter Sarah was all he had left, and she meant everything to him. Tears started forming in his eyes. "I do have a daughter," Frank whispered. "She's a teacher. She's getting married to a good man. I just want to look presentable for her special day." "Sure she is," Tony said, rolling his eyes. "And I bet you were a rocket scientist, right? Look, just get out of here before you upset my real customers even more." Frank stood there for a moment, fighting back tears. The whole shop was watching him now. Some people looked angry at Tony, others just looked away. A teenage boy was recording everything on his phone. Frank turned to leave, but then stopped. His shaking hand touched his tattoo again, and he turned back around. "I was in the army," Frank said quietly. Tony burst out laughing. "Oh, here we go. Let me guess, you were a big shot general, right? You probably saved the world single-handedly." Some customers started laughing along with Tony. The situation was getting meaner by the minute. "I was in Korea," Frank continued, his voice still quiet but steady. "I was just a sergeant." "Korea?" Tony mocked. "When, last week? You don't look old enough to have been in any real war. Stop making up stories to get sympathy." Frank rolled up his sleeve a little more, showing more of the faded tattoo. The eagle was clearer now, and there were some numbers underneath it. An older man in the corner, probably in his 70s, suddenly sat up straighter. He had been reading a newspaper and mostly ignoring the confrontation, but something about the tattoo caught his attention. 1950 to 1953, Frank said. I was with the 2nd Infantry Division. Tony was still laughing. The 2nd Infantry Division? Wow, that sounds so official. Did you Google that before you came in here? But the older man in the corner was now standing up, moving closer to get a better look at Frank's arm. His face was getting paler with each step. We were at Heartbreak Ridge, Frank continued, not seeming to notice the older man approaching. Lost a lot of good men there. I was wounded twice, but I kept fighting because my brothers needed me. Tony was still mocking him. Brothers? The only brothers you have are the other homeless guys under the bridge. The older man was now close enough to see Frank's tattoo clearly. His hands started shaking as he read the numbers and symbols. His face went completely white. Sir, the older man said in a trembling voice, interrupting Tony's laughter. Sir, may I ask your name? Frank looked confused by the sudden question. Frank Dalton, he answered. The older man's eyes filled with tears. Sergeant Dalton? From Charlie Company? Frank studied the man's face for a moment, then his eyes widened. Jimmy? Jimmy Morrison? The older man nodded, tears now streaming down his face. Yes, sir. Private Morrison. You saved my life at Heartbreak Ridge. The entire barbershop fell silent. Tony's laughter died in his throat. You carried me 3 miles, Jimmy said, his voice breaking. I was shot in the leg and couldn't walk. The Chinese were everywhere. You could have left me and saved yourself, but you didn't. You carried me all the way to the medic station. Frank's eyes were now filled with tears too. Jimmy, I can't believe it's you. You were just a kid then. I was 19, Jimmy said. Scared out of my mind. But you kept telling me jokes during that whole 3-mile walk, keeping me conscious, keeping me alive. The shop was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Everyone was staring at the 2 old men, understanding that they were witnessing something incredible. Jimmy turned to face the entire barbershop, his voice getting stronger. This man is a hero. He saved my life and the lives of countless other soldiers. He fought in one of the bloodiest battles of the Korean War. He earned a Silver Star for his actions that day. Tony's face had gone from mocking to shocked to deeply ashamed. The other customers were looking at him with disgust now. And you, Jimmy said, pointing at Tony, you just humiliated a war hero because of how he looks. Frank was crying openly now, not from humiliation, but from seeing his old friend after so many years. I thought about you so many times over the years, Jimmy said, putting his hand on Frank's shoulder. Wondered what happened to you. I became a teacher because of what you taught me about courage that day. I named my son Frank after you. The teenage boy who had been recording put his phone away, looking ashamed that he had been filming what he thought was going to be entertainment. Tony stood there, not knowing what to say. His face was red with embarrassment, and several customers were glaring at him. The young mother who had spoken up earlier stood up. I think you owe this man an apology, she said to Tony. Tony looked around the shop. Every single person was staring at him, waiting to see what he would do. He walked slowly over to Frank. Sir, Tony said, his voice barely above a whisper. I am so sorry. I was completely wrong. Please let me give you the best haircut you've ever had. No charge. Frank looked at Tony for a long moment, then nodded. Thank you, he said simply. As Tony prepared his station, Jimmy sat in the chair next to Frank's. Tell me about your daughter's wedding, Jimmy said with a smile. Frank's whole face lit up. Her name is Sarah. She's marrying a doctor. The wedding is next Saturday. Jimmy smiled. I'd be honored to attend, if you'd have me. Frank started crying again, but this time they were tears of joy. I would love that, Jimmy. As Tony carefully cut Frank's hair, treating him with the utmost respect and care, the other customers began talking to Frank, asking about his service, thanking him for his sacrifice. The teenage boy approached Frank when the haircut was finished. "Sir," he said quietly, "I'm sorry I was recording earlier. That was wrong of me." Frank smiled at the young man. "It's okay, son. Just remember that everyone has a story. You never know what someone has been through just by looking at them." When Frank left the barbershop that day, he looked 20 years younger. His hair was perfectly trimmed, and more importantly, his dignity had been restored. Jimmy walked out with him, and they exchanged phone numbers, promising to stay in touch. A week later, at Sarah's wedding, Frank walked his daughter down the aisle looking proud and handsome. In the audience, Jimmy Morrison sat in the third row, honored to witness the joy of the man who had saved his life more than 70 years ago. The wedding photographer captured a beautiful moment of Frank dancing with Sarah, both of them smiling and laughing. If you looked closely at the photo, you could see the small eagle tattoo on Frank's arm, a quiet reminder of the hero hidden beneath the surface of an ordinary-looking old man. Sometimes the most extraordinary people look the most ordinary. Sometimes the greatest heroes are standing right next to us, and we don't even know it.